I never thought I'd live long enough to feel shame in my daughter's voice. I'd known sorrow, yes, heartbreak, loss, loneliness. Those were old companions of mine. But shame, that was something I thought belonged to the young, to those still chasing what the world thought of them. I didn't know it could reach an old woman like me, even after her bones had turned soft with time. The day it happened, the air smelled like rain. I had traveled across the city by bus, holding a small paper bag of cornbread I'd baked that morning. My hands trembled a little, not from the weight, but from the ache that always settled in my knuckles when the weather turned cold. I wore my old coat, the same one I'd worn when my daughter Mara graduated high school. She'd laughed at it back then, teasing me about how it smelled like cedar and old spice from the chest it came from. "Mama, you should buy something new," she'd said. "You deserve it." I used to think those words meant love. The bus ride was long, and I stared out the window at the city, a city that had changed so much since I first came here. Skyscrapers where fields once were, glass towers where old stores used to stand. I didn't belong here anymore, but my daughter did. She had a fine job, a husband with perfect teeth, and a house she said was in a nice neighborhood. She'd invited me, well, almost invited me, when we spoke last. Her voice had been polite but careful, as if she was walking through glass. "Mama," she'd said, "if you want to come see the house, that'd be nice. Just call before you do, all right? I've been busy with work, and Evan's family might come over." Busy, that word again, always busy. Still I went, because mothers go, even when they're not asked the way they used to be. I wanted to see the life she'd built, even if I wasn't quite part of it anymore. When the bus finally stopped near her street, I could feel my heart quicken. Her house stood tall and white, with neat little shrubs trimmed in perfect circles. There was a flag by the porch and two cars in the driveway, one of them shiny enough to mirror the gray in my hair. I took a deep breath and walked up the path, clutching that bag of cornbread like it was something precious. It wasn't much, but it was what I could give. I rang the bell, and when Mara opened the door, her face froze for just a moment, the kind of pause that people make when they're trying to hide surprise they shouldn't feel. "Mama," she said, smiling, but her eyes, they didn't match her lips. "I didn't know you were coming today." I smiled, small and tired. "I just wanted to see your new place. Thought I'd bring you something warm." She hesitated, just for a heartbeat, before stepping aside. "Of course. Come in." The inside was everything I imagined and more. Polished floors, wide windows, pictures in silver frames. I saw her husband Evan standing by the counter. He was on the phone laughing at something, but when he saw me, his smile faded a bit. He nodded politely, but didn't speak. That silence wrapped around me like a cold wind. Mara offered me tea, and we sat at the table. I looked around, noticing that none of the pictures had me in them, not one. There were photos of her and Evan at a lake, at Christmas parties, holding wine glasses, smiling wide, but not me. Not even one old photo of her as a little girl in my arms. I sipped the tea slowly, trying to keep the tremor from showing in my hands. "You've made a fine home," I said softly. She smiled again, that careful, tight smile. "Thank you, Mama." We spoke about small things after that. Her job, the neighborhood, the weather. I wanted to ask about her heart, about whether she was truly happy. But I didn't. She looked so far away, even when sitting right in front of me. Then the doorbell rang again. Her face changed. I saw something flicker in her eyes, panic maybe, or discomfort. She rose quickly and smoothed her dress. "That must be the neighbors," she said, her voice rushing. "They're dropping off something." She walked to the door and I heard laughter, light, friendly laughter, and then a woman's voice saying, "Oh, we didn't know you had company." Mara's reply came soft but sharp like a knife hidden behind a curtain. Oh, that's just my mother. She stopped by. Please don't mind the visit. She's just leaving soon. My chest tightened. My fingers went cold. Just leaving soon. When the woman stepped inside for a brief hello, Mara's voice dropped. Not low enough that I couldn't hear, but low enough that she hoped I wouldn't. Please, she whispered, don't tell the neighbors that you're my mom. At first, I thought I'd misheard. My ears weren't as sharp as they once were. But when her eyes met mine, wide, pleading, desperate, I knew I hadn't. Something inside me, something small and quiet, broke. I wanted to ask her why. Was I not good enough? Had my accent, my old clothes, my rough hands shamed her? Did the scent of cornbread offend her new world? But I said nothing, not one word. The neighbor waved politely, and I smiled back. That smile, that's what women like me learn to do. We smile through storms. We smile when our hearts crack open. We smile when our children forget where they came from. After they left, Mara turned back to me, her eyes wet with something that wasn't quite guilt, not quite sorrow. Mama, please understand, she whispered. People here, they're different. I just don't want anyone to think. Think what? I said softly, my voice trembling but steady. That you were raised by a woman who worked hard, by a woman who scrubbed other people's floors so you could have soft hands. Her lips parted, but no words came. I stood up slowly, my knees aching as I did. I picked up my coat and the bag of cornbread that still sat untouched on the table. You don't have to be ashamed of me, Mara, I said, but I'll spare you the trouble of pretending. I walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the cold air. The wind bit my cheeks, but it didn't sting half as much as her words did. As I reached the gate, I heard her voice behind me, faint, trembling. Mama, wait! But I didn't. I just kept walking. Because sometimes love doesn't fade when people change. It just becomes something heavier to carry. I walked for a long time that afternoon. My feet were tired, my knees ached, but I didn't care much about that. Pain in the body fades. It's the pain in your chest that lingers. I didn't even know where I was going. Just away from the house that was too clean, too cold, too silent for the kind of love I carried. The city looked strange to me. Cars passed fast, people didn't meet eyes, and everything smelled of concrete and exhaust instead of pine and rain. When I first moved here 40 years ago, it was different. The houses were smaller, the people humbler. I came then with a baby in my arms and hope in my pocket. Mara had been just 6 months old when I left the reservation. Her father, Elias, was gone by then. Some say he left for work and never came back. But I knew he left because the weight of staying was too heavy. He wasn't cruel, just weak in the way men sometimes are when life doesn't bend the way they hoped. I remember sitting by the fire with Mara on my lap, telling her stories about our people, stories about rivers that whispered and trees that remembered names. She'd press her small hands against my cheeks and ask, Mama, are those stories true? And I'd smile and tell her, they're truer than anything you'll read in books, my girl. I raised her on stories, prayers, and the little money I earned cleaning houses. There was one home I remember, a tall one with marble floors and gold handles on the doors. The woman there would always greet me with that polite smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. Her daughter, about Mara's age, would sometimes follow me around while I mopped, asking questions about my old ways. I used to think one day, Mara will live in a house like this, but not because someone else cleaned it for her. She'll earn it herself. And she did. She worked hard, went to college, built a life that shined. Every achievement of hers felt like redemption for all the things I couldn't give her. I used to think I'd done right, that love, my kind of love, would never embarrass her, but maybe I was wrong. I stopped at a park bench that afternoon, my legs trembling from the walk. The paper bag was still in my hand. I opened it and broke a piece of cornbread still warm from the morning. The smell took me back to our old kitchen, with the cracked stove and the sound of laughter echoing off tin walls. I used to make it every Sunday, even when we didn't have enough sugar. Mara loved it then. She'd lick the crumbs from her fingers and say, "Mama, when I'm grown, I'll make this for you." I looked down at the piece in my hand, and tears came without asking. Not the loud kind, just slow, quiet ones that fell on the brown paper and left little dark spots. I don't blame her, not fully. The world changed too much, too fast. I saw it happening long before she did. The way her voice softened when she spoke to her teachers, but sharpened when she spoke to me. The way she'd flinch when I came to her school wearing my handmade shawl. "Mama," she'd whisper, "don't wear that next time, okay? People will stare." I used to laugh it off, tell her, "Let them stare. They'll see where your strength comes from." But strength doesn't shine in glass buildings, not the kind I carried. It looks too raw, too rough, too ancient. When Mara got older, she started visiting less. Calls became shorter, gifts more expensive but less thoughtful. She once gave me a perfume for Christmas, the kind that cost too much. I never used it. It sat on my dresser for years, collecting dust, because I didn't need to smell like anyone else to remember who I was. And yet, I can't lie to myself. Sitting there on that park bench, I realized something that hurt more than all her words. Maybe I hadn't just lost my daughter that day. Maybe I'd been losing her slowly, one piece at a time over the years. I thought of her wedding day, the last time she introduced me to anyone with pride. I wore a simple blue dress and the beaded necklace my grandmother gave me. Her husband's family was kind on the surface, but I caught the way they looked at me, that quick measuring glance that decides your worth in one breath. I remember one woman leaning to another and whispering, "She seems traditional." That word, traditional, they used it like it meant small. After the ceremony, I gave Mara a gift, a handmade quilt. Every square told a story from our lineage, the stars, the lakes, the winters that made us strong. She smiled when I handed it to her, but I noticed she didn't open it. She set it aside, and by the time they drove off to their honeymoon, it was still sitting on the chair. I waited for her to hang it one day. She never did. That night, after leaving her new house, I took the long bus back home. The driver looked at me in the mirror once or twice, maybe wondering if I was all right. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. When I reached my stop, the streets were quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy. My small apartment felt colder than usual. I set the cornbread on the counter, untouched, and sat by the window. The moon hung low, like it was listening. I thought about calling her, maybe to tell her I understood, that I wasn't angry, just disappointed. But my hands froze on the phone, because what would I say? "It's all right that you hid me? It's all right that you're ashamed of where you came from?" Those words would choke me before they left my mouth. I whispered instead to no one but the night, "I did everything for you, my girl, everything." And for the first time in a long time, I felt small, not because of age, but because love, the love I gave so freely, suddenly felt like it didn't belong anywhere. I lay awake for hours that night, listening to the hum of traffic outside, remembering the sound of her voice when she was little, the way she'd run into my arms after school. She used to say, "Mama, you're my whole world." Funny thing about worlds, they can vanish without sound, without warning, without even meaning to. And as I sat there tracing the cracks in my old hands, I asked myself a question I never thought I would. Do children ever realize the pain they cause when they outgrow the people who loved them first? The morning after that long, sleepless night, I brewed my coffee the way I always do, black, strong, with that bitter scent that reminds me I'm still alive. The steam rose slowly, dancing in the cold air of my kitchen, and for a moment I watched it like it was trying to tell me something. Maybe it was. Maybe it was reminding me that even the lightest things, warmth, love, promises, disappear if you don't hold them close enough. Days passed quietly after that visit. Mara didn't call. Not that I expected her to. She'd probably convinced herself that nothing had happened, that I'd understood her little whisper at the doorway, that somehow it hadn't broken something inside me. But I'm old, not foolish. Silence between a mother and daughter is never empty. It's loud with everything neither dares to say. I went back to my routine, feeding the stray cat that visits my porch, tending to the few plants that still bloom in cracked pots, and talking to my late husband's photograph like I always do. His face, frozen in that faded picture, still makes me feel less alone. I told him about the visit, about how proud our daughter looked standing in that shiny kitchen, and how she introduced me as just my mother from out of town. I didn't tell him the rest. He's been gone too long. He doesn't need to carry my heartbreak, too. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, I found an old envelope tucked inside a drawer. It was yellowed, the edges curled like it had been waiting years to be found. It was a letter Mara had written to me when she was in college. I remember that time. She'd just moved to the city, scared but determined. She used to write every week then. I sat down, the pile of clothes forgotten, and read it. "Dear Mama," it began, "I miss your cooking. I miss your humming when you sweep. And I miss the way you always say my name like it's a song. I'm working hard, Mama, and I want to make you proud. I promise one day I'll buy you a house where you'll never have to work again." The handwriting was round and hopeful, like the heart of a girl who still believed in forever. My eyes blurred before I could reach the end. Somewhere between that letter and now, something had changed, and I still don't know when or how. Maybe it was the day she realized she didn't need me anymore. Or maybe it was the day I realized she did, but wouldn't admit it. Weeks later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Not from Mara, from her husband, Evan. He wrote politely, like a man trying to do the right thing. "Mom, Mara's been unwell, stress from work, the baby, everything. She might not have told you, but she's expecting. Please don't take anything she said personally." I read that line 3 times. She was having a baby, my grandchild, and I wasn't supposed to know until now. My heart leapt, not with anger, but with that familiar ache of longing. I packed a small bag, made some soup, and took the bus again the next morning. I told myself I'd just check on her, nothing more. I even rehearsed what I'd say. "You don't have to apologize, Mara. Let's just start over." But when I reached their street, I didn't knock right away. I stood outside for a long while, watching her house from the gate. It looked peaceful. A little white fence, curtains fluttering, a wind chime that sang softly in the breeze. For a moment, I imagined walking in, being greeted with a hug, being told, "I missed you, Mama." Instead, Evan opened the door. His face froze in surprise. "Mom, you came?" "Yes," I said softly. "I heard she wasn't well." He hesitated, scratching his neck. "She's resting. Maybe it's not the best time. She's sensitive these days." Sensitive. That word felt sharp, like a blade disguised as concern. But I nodded anyway. "Can I just leave this?" I said, handing him the jar of soup. "It's her favorite. She used to ask for it when she was sick as a child." He took it gently. "Of course, she'll appreciate it." I looked past him, hoping to see her face, just a glimpse. But the hallway behind him was dark, and I couldn't hear her voice. "Tell her I love her," I whispered. He nodded. "I will." I turned to leave, but halfway down the walkway, I heard it, her voice. "Who was that?" Evan answered quietly, thinking I was out of earshot. "It was your mom." And then her reply, faint but clear. I told you not to let her come here. What if the neighbors saw? The words hit me like winter wind, cold, cruel, familiar. I froze right there, my hand on the little white fence. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I wanted to shout, to tell her that she had no right, that I was the one who had carried her through storms, that I had fed her when there was nothing to eat, that I had stitched her clothes by candlelight when she was too young to understand sacrifice. But I didn't. I just stood there, my heart breaking so quietly it wouldn't disturb anyone. Then I walked away, slow and steady, as if each step was a goodbye. When I reached the bus stop, I sat down and stared at my reflection in the glass shelter. My hair, once black and long, was silver now. My eyes, tired but kind, looked back at me like they were searching for answers. Maybe she was ashamed of me, of where she came from. Maybe she believed love had to look polished to be real. The bus came and went, but I didn't get on. I sat there until the sun dipped low and the world turned gold. I thought of the baby growing inside her, my grandchild. Would they ever know me? Would Mara tell them about the woman who used to hum lullabies in a language older than time? Or would she erase me completely, one generation at a time? That thought broke me. Not for myself, but for her, because one day she'll grow old too. One day she'll sit by a window waiting for a knock that never comes, and maybe then she'll understand what she did to me. I lifted my gaze to the sky, whispering softly, "Spirit above, let her find peace, even if it's far from me." But still, I couldn't help but wonder, do children ever realize the shame they plant in their parents' hearts when they hide their roots? Winter had begun to settle in by the time the phone finally rang again. I remember it clearly. The air was crisp, the windows fogged, and the smell of rain lingered on the porch wood. I had been sitting in my old armchair, knitting a scarf I'd probably never wear, when the shrill ring broke the silence. My first thought, as always, was Mara. And then I scolded myself. Why would it be her after all these months? But it was. Her voice was quiet at first, trembling like the wind through dry branches. "Mama?" I froze, the yarn falling from my lap. "Yes, it's me." There was a pause long enough to make my heart ache. Then she said, I had the baby." My eyes stung before I could speak. "Oh, my sweet girl," I whispered. "A baby. What's her name?" "His," she said softly. "We named him Noah." Noah. The name tasted like hope. "That's beautiful, Mara. How is he? How are you?" Another long silence. "I'm tired. He cries a lot." "Evan's back at work. I didn't know it would be this hard." Her voice cracked on that last word, and just like that, all the bitterness I had swallowed, all the pride I had used to hold myself together, it crumbled. She was still my daughter, no matter what she'd said, no matter how deep the shame had cut. "Mara," I said gently, "can I come see you?" "I don't know," she whispered. "It's just things are messy right now. I don't want to upset Evan." The way she said it, cautious, afraid, told me everything I needed to know. That house might have looked perfect from the outside, but inside, it was cracking. "I understand," I said after a pause, "but if you ever need me for anything, day or night, I'll come." She didn't respond for a moment, and when she did, her voice was so small it nearly broke me. "I know, Mama." Then the line went dead. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her alone, holding that tiny baby, her eyes tired and lost. I remembered my own nights like that when she was small, and I'd sit up till dawn, rocking her in my arms while her father worked double shifts. We had so little, but I never once felt ashamed of her. I never hid her from anyone. She was the one thing I'd ever done right. 2 weeks later, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find Evan standing there, his face pale and his hands stuffed awkwardly into his coat pockets. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I stepped aside. "Come in." He sat at the kitchen table, looking around at the faded curtains, the chipped mugs, the warmth that no longer needed decoration. "She's not doing well," he said finally. "After the baby. She's been different, withdrawn, moody. Sometimes she cries for hours." I felt my heart twist. "Is it postpartum?" He nodded. "The doctor says so, but she won't let anyone in. Not even me." I sat down slowly. "And why are you here, Evan?" He looked me in the eye. "Because last night she kept whispering your name in her sleep." For a moment I couldn't breathe. The room seemed to spin, not from surprise, but from the flood of memories that came rushing in. Her small hand clutching my dress, her laughter echoing through our tiny home, the way she used to fall asleep with her head on my lap, safe in a world that didn't yet know cruelty. "When can I see her?" I asked. "Tomorrow," he said, "if you're willing." The next morning I took the same old bus across the city again. My fingers trembled as I held onto the railing, the scenery blurring outside the window. I told myself to stay calm, to forgive before I even arrived. Because sometimes forgiveness isn't for them. It's for the parts of us that can't bear to stay angry anymore. When I reached her house, Evan opened the door quietly and led me upstairs. The hallway was dim, the air heavy with the faint scent of baby powder and something else. Sorrow, maybe. He stopped outside a door and whispered, "She's in there." I knocked softly. "Mara?" No answer. I pushed the door open and found her sitting by the window, her hair loose, her robe wrinkled, a small bundle sleeping in her arms. The light fell gently across her face, and for the first time in years, I saw her as she really was. Not the woman who whispered cruel things, but my child, broken and trying to be whole again. She looked up at me, startled. "Mama." "I came to see my grandson," I said, forcing a smile through the tears. "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded. I walked closer, my old knees trembling, and looked down at that tiny face. He was perfect, soft skin, tiny fingers curled into fists, his lips pursed like he was dreaming. My breath caught. "Oh, Mara," I whispered. "He looks just like you when you were born." She didn't reply, just watched me, her eyes filling with something I couldn't name. I sat beside her, the silence stretching between us. After a while she spoke, her voice hoarse, trembling. "I'm sorry, Mama." I turned to her slowly. "For what, my love?" "For that day," she said. "For everything I said. I was scared. I wanted to fit in, to be accepted. Everyone in this neighborhood is so polished, and I thought if they knew how poor we were, how I grew up." I stopped her with a gentle hand. "Mara, don't say that. We weren't poor. We had love. We had laughter. That's worth more than anything you can buy." She sobbed then, really sobbed, and it was like watching years of pride and pain fall away from her. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said. "I was just ashamed of myself." I pulled her close, the baby warm between us. "Oh, my child, I know. But shame only grows in silence. And silence, my dear, is what kills families." She cried against my shoulder, whispering, "I'm sorry," again and again until her voice broke. I held her like I used to, firm, steady, forgiving. Because that's what mothers do. We hold on, even when they've let go. After a while, Noah stirred in her arms and began to fuss. She smiled through her tears. "Would you like to hold him?" My hands shook as I took him. He was so small, so impossibly delicate. His heartbeat fluttered against my chest like a promise. "Hello, little one," I whispered. "I'm your grandma, the one your mama forgot for a while." Mara laughed softly, wiping her face. She didn't forget. She just lost her way. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in a long while, I saw my daughter again. Not the woman who turned away, not the stranger behind fancy walls, but the little girl who once clung to my hand and said, "Don't let go, Mama." And I never did. That afternoon, as I left her house, I felt lighter. The ache was still there, but softer now, wrapped in something that felt like peace. The trees along the street swayed gently, the sky a pale shade of forgiveness. Maybe love doesn't fade after all. Maybe it just waits, quietly, for the right moment to be remembered. But as I rode the bus home, I couldn't help wondering, how many mothers spend their lives waiting for the child who finally remembers how to love them back? Years passed like soft rain on an old window, quietly, steadily, until I almost forgot how long it had been since that morning I first held Noah. He was 3 the next time I came to visit, and he ran to the door before his mother could even call my name. "Grandma!" he squealed, his little feet thudding across the floor, arms wide open like I was someone worth running to. That sound, a grandma. It healed something I hadn't realized was still bleeding. Mara stood behind him, her hair tied back, her smile smaller than before, but gentler somehow. The kind of smile that comes after a long storm finally clears. "He remembers you," she said. I knelt, my knees crackling, and scooped Noah up. "How could he not? I send him stories every week." She laughed softly. "He makes me read them every night before bed. He thinks you live in a magical forest." "Maybe I do," I said, brushing his curls. "A small one full of memories." Those visits became more frequent after that. Evan would drop me home sometimes, his manner warmer, more understanding. The neighbors, the ones who used to make Mara feel small, began to wave when they saw me. I suppose guilt has a way of teaching kindness, or maybe they finally saw what family was supposed to look like. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Still, there were moments when the old wound would ache. Sometimes, while watching Noah play, I'd catch Mara looking at me, not with shame anymore, but with a kind of longing. A wish, perhaps, that she could rewrite the day she'd told me not to speak to her neighbors. And in those quiet glances, I saw her apology 100 times over. One evening, as the sky turned gold and the wind rustled through her porch trees, she sat beside me, holding a cup of tea. The same way she used to when she was a teenager, nervous about some boy or exam. "Mama," she began softly, "do you ever think about how we got here?" I smiled faintly. "Every day." "I used to think I was protecting myself," she said, eyes distant, "from judgment, from embarrassment, but I realize now I wasn't protecting anything. I was just running from love that made me uncomfortable because it reminded me where I came from." Her words were slow, deliberate, the kind that only come after years of reflection. "Mara," I said, my voice shaking just a little, "there's nothing shameful about where we come from. We built everything with our hands. Our love was earned, not bought." She nodded, tears brimming. "I know that now. I just wish I'd realized it sooner." I placed my wrinkled hand over hers. "It's never too late to come home, my dear. The door was never locked." We sat in silence then, listening to the cicadas hum outside. The air smelled of cut grass and rain, and for a moment I could almost see the little girl she used to be, hair tangled, cheeks flushed, running barefoot through the yard, calling my name. Time, I realized, doesn't erase love. It only folds it into quieter places. As the years continued, Noah grew taller, louder, curious about everything. He loved to sit with me when I visited, asking about the old house where his mama grew up. So one day when he turned 10, I took him there. It wasn't much anymore. The paint had peeled, the porch creaked, and the garden had long surrendered to weeds. But when I opened the rusty gate, he gasped as if stepping into a fairy tale. "This is where Mommy lived?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and where she learned to dream." He wandered through the rooms, touching the walls like they held secrets. "It feels happy here," he said finally. I smiled, my chest tightening. It was. That night, when I took him home, Mara hugged me longer than usual. "He told me everything," she whispered. "He said the house felt like love." I looked at her with a soft chuckle. "That's because it was built with it." She smiled through tears. "You're still teaching him more than I ever could." But I shook my head. "No, child, I'm just reminding you both of what was never lost." Months passed after that visit. Seasons changed again, and my body began to slow. The cold hurt my bones more. My breaths felt shorter. I knew deep down that I was nearing my own winter. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside my window, I wrote a letter, not for myself, but for Mara. I sealed it in an envelope and asked my neighbor to deliver it when I was gone. In that letter I wrote, "My dearest girl, I forgive you. Truly, I do. Not because you asked for it, but because love doesn't keep score. You made mistakes. We all do. But you came back, and that's what matters. Don't ever hide from who you are again. Let Noah know that his grandmother was proud of every scar she earned, because they meant she lived. And when you miss me, don't look for me in photographs or empty rooms. Look in the mirror. I'll be there. In your eyes, your laugh, your heart, always, Mama." When Mara received that letter, she told me later, she sat on the floor for hours, holding it to her chest, crying until she laughed, because forgiveness doesn't need to be heard to be felt. And now, as I tell you this story, I want to ask something, not out of pity, but out of truth. How many of us push away the people who love us most, only to realize too late that they were the ones who never stopped standing at the door waiting for us to come home? If you've ever felt the ache of silence or the sting of pride, let this story be your sign. Call them. Visit them. Forgive before the years steal your chance. Because sometimes the words we don't say are the ones that haunt us longest. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it. Not for me, but for every mother, every daughter, every heart that's still waiting for the apology that never came.